Welcome to the Deer Hunter Podcast, a platform created to entertain, educate, and evolve the modern-day deer hunter. That's awesome. What should we talk about?
I think we should talk about the Pigeon River country.
Do that. We can talk about deer camp.
Deer camp,
Do
public land.
Do you, because I do.
What's that?
Do you sleep with your face paint on and just, because people have asked me like, oh, is that a pain to wash off? And I don't know, it comes off very easily on the pillow.
It does, and I'll worry about it when I get out of the woods.
I steal my wife's makeup wipes.
Okay.
Just the
makeup.
Not the makeup, just the wipe.
You know, you forget that.
Yeah, baby wipes, those work.
You forget that it's on. You got to be careful about what kind of facial hair you got going on, because like if you got a little bit of stubble, then it doesn't come out.
Yeah, I've never been one for the face painting.
Yeah. But for like a face mask, I don't like something being around my face and something around my ears, and
Well, when it's this cold out too, the face mask does get a little funky because you're breathing on it the whole time and it's condensating.
Fogs up your binocs and
yeah, it's not perfect, but
That hiss that anybody will be hearing in the background is the hiss of a propane lantern sitting here on the table, because we're sitting in a outfitter tent in the kind of right in the middle of the Pigeon River State Forest, right?
Yeah, well, we don't want to give away the exact location.
We're not going to do that.
You know, when we first set up deer camp here, there was nobody else really kind of anywhere around here hunting. It was quite a ways away. Last year, there were deer camps all up and down the road, and everybody else at deer camp got mad at me and said I need to stop writing about it and we'll stop getting crowded out.
Really?
Yeah, right. So on the podcast, I can't tell you exactly where in the Pigeon River country we are, but
Well, I'd say you're doing your job.
yeah, we're somewhere in the Pigeon River country.
I like to see the influx of people. I mean, it's, you love it and you can hate it at the same time.
Well, I want a lot of people to come and enjoy the Pigeon River country, just not, on the same block of public land we're trying to hunt during deer season.
I agree. I fully agree.
They can be on where other people hunt, that's fine, but not here.
the fall deer hunting's terrible. Just focus on the spring turkeys.
Yeah, there's no deer here anyways.
There's 105,000 acres, if I'm correct. I think there's room for everybody.
There is. There's room for everybody, but if you're thinking about coming here to hunt, there's no deer. The elk drove them all out. The coyotes are eating them all, and you won't find any deer.
Nowhere.
Well, we found a couple so far. We've been up, what's today? And when we're recording this, it's Sunday, November
12th, I think, right?
Yeah.
Or
So,
yeah,
Yep.
12th.
We're essentially at deer camp early for the opener of Michigan's rifle season, which is Wednesday.
Right, but just so everybody's clear, we're not hunting with rifles early. We're just up here. We started bow hunting early, and we kind of did this year. Given the way last year's have gone, in my camp, it's my dad and my brother and my cousin and I, and the rut's always just a little bit before firearm season, and then it gets a lot busier then, and we just enjoy really being around camp with each other. So this year, my dad got a crossbow, my brother got my old compound bow, and my cousins always had a compound bow, and I'm switching to trad this year. So we figured we could move camp up, get a few days of bow hunting, catch the tail end of the rut, and then still do firearm deer season. So it kind of works out well that way. So
I've done it that way the last couple of years, and I really enjoy that because you catch the tail end of Well, you catch right in the middle of some of the best days to hunt all year. Um, and you get those couple days before everybody hits the woods with the firearms because it changes quite dramatically after, opening day and the day after. So
Yep.
it's always bittersweet to lay the bow down. I'm not ready for it yet.
I may still hunt with the bow, just put on my orange vest when I do it.
Really?
So, yeah. Switching to trad this year, I enjoy shooting it so much. Today I had an experience with a spike buck that made my heart beat harder than shooting an 8-point with my rifle 2 years ago. Still hunting with a recurve. And when I can get that kind of experience out of it, I almost don't want to cheat myself out of that experience by shooting it with shooting one with a rifle, because I'll be thinking, could I have gotten closer to that with a trad bow? So I still haven't decided. I still may hunt with a rifle opening day, but I'm kind of leaning toward just sticking with my recurve.
Yeah, I totally get it. Like I said, it's bittersweet for me to, I hunt with my longbow in October, and then usually the month of November, I pick up my compound to try to put the odds a little more in my favor and take advantage of those couple weeks where, you have a chance to get a nicer buck. And then when November 15th hits, I lay the compound down and I pick up the gun, and it's always bittersweet just setting each one of them down. It's like progressively. It almost feels now like I've shortened up my deer season a little bit because it's in like weekly increments.
Yeah.
It goes by a little bit faster, but I haven't had much time to hunt this year. It's been kind of a bummer, but this week when I came up yesterday, I got up yesterday afternoon, I put some tree stands up, I opened our camper up, and then I went out and hiked into a swamp and was going to set up a tree stand. I was about 3/4 of a mile out into a cedar swamp, and when I got out there, there was no sign at all. We have fresh snow here. We've had it for, a couple days?
Yeah.
So no deer tracks in this little ridge top in the cedar swamp, and I thought, I'm not going to put this tree stand up and have to tear down in the dark and get out of this swamp in the dark if there's no evidence that there's been any deer here. So I decided to hike back out, and then by the time I got out, we were closing in about 45 minutes at dark. So I just walked in to a clear cut, that the select cut that the state had done here. I don't know if it was a year or two ago, and I thought I would sit on the outskirts of that and see if anything would come in to feed right at dark. And 4 doe came in right at dark, but just like it always seems to happen when I'm hunting on the ground, I moved at the inopportune time, and they picked me up and blew and ran the other way.
It's amazing how that changes between being in a tree and being on the ground. Your room for error, your room for movement, your leeway goes to almost zero. Your movements have to be almost non-existent and precise, or well hidden by cover in some way if you're on the ground, because they catch everything.
Yeah.
Oh, they're so cagey up here too. I mean, these deer
they're wild.
I hunted in Ohio for a couple days last month, and you could get away with murder, it felt like. In the tree stand up here, you can't even breathe heavy, and something will catch you 200 yards away. It's just like, holy cow, man. They're always looking up. It's the only place I've ever hunted where the deer walk in and they're looking up, It's just ridiculous.
They are tuned in like unbelievable. I was telling you guys before we started recording that this morning, I was, my mission right now, first priority is to take some venison home to my family. My wife, strict orders. If you're going up there for a week and you're going to be gone, bring back some deer. And I'm like, all right. So I got a public land and a private land doe tag. So I thought that shouldn't be too big of an issue, But hunting big woods, man, you never know. It could be happening there one day, and then the next day, it's happening 5 miles away, and it's hard to get your finger on. But I had a doe come running in, and I thought sure thing she was going to come right in front of me, and she got in. I must have got just a little bit of a wind swirl where she picked up my wind and she stood behind a tree, and she stood there without moving for 10 or 15 minutes and just standing there, and then just slowly walked off. And it's just like, man, you gotta be kidding me.
There, when you read the hunting magazines and you think about where deer might be and where they're likely to be and where you're expecting them to be, the big woods is so different. It's not where you have, a fence row and there's feeding over here and bedding over there and you set up in the middle. They can bed down anywhere. There's food sources everywhere. The trails go every which way, and who knows which one they're using at any given time. So there's sign all over the place. It's very hard to pattern deer, other than some of the well-used trails that you can expect a doe will come along at some point, and hopefully a dumb buck and rut will be chasing her. But it's hard to pattern them as far as saying this is a definite feeding area, this is a definite bedding area, because...
Now we're back.
All right.
Untechnical difficulties.
Well, it is deer camp.
It is deer camp. We are sitting out in the middle of a field running a podcast off a motorcycle battery, so... I underestimated how much juice the motorcycle battery could give out, and now we are jumpering it off a truck, and we're back up and running. So,
Yeah.
What were we talking about?
How wild the deer are here.
Yeah.
Versus other parts of the state.
Yeah, and how hard it is to essentially there's no patterning them, right? I mean, they could make a 3-mile move in a night.
They could, or they just have no definite set bedding here. Just if you're reading Field and Stream and looking for, you find your CRP field here and your fence row here and your bedding here and your food there, throw all that out the window. When you come out to public land up here, because they're all over and they're also nowhere at once.
Yeah.
Like at any given point, you could have one be there.
Yep.
It could be under any bush, bed down under, any tree in any field. They can be anywhere, and yet you may not see one for half a day, and then suddenly they're where you never expected them.
They love any little bump of elevation that can give them a vantage point. I've noticed that finding beds in the last couple days. I've been doing a lot of scouting, and anywhere where there's a big bump in elevation, I shouldn't say big, it could be small, but just enough to where if you get up on it, you have a vantage point that allows you to see a pretty good distance. Man, do they love bedding down on those. And yeah, how are you supposed to get anywhere near them? They see it coming from a mile away.
Well, you can. It's tough. It's not easy.
Good face paint.
Yeah, good face paint. Yeah, I got close to a spike today, and I was willing to take a spike today, and when we talk about harvest choices and APRs and all of that kind of stuff, in previous years I kind of had the rule for myself that it was 3 on a side or better or any doe. Hunting with a recurve for the first time this year, I'm still hunting with a recurve. I'll take a spike or a fork, and if anybody's got a problem with that, I'll tell them to go out and still hunt with a recurve, and then you can give me crap about it.
Right. I completely agree. I know exactly what you were talking about because you were telling me what you were going through when that happened, and I've had that same experience when I started hunting with a longbow, and I had a 1.5-year-old buck 10 yards in front of me, and I wanted to shoot it so badly, but it was on my brother's property where they don't shoot 1.5-year-old bucks, and that was the only thing that stopped me because I just could not believe the adrenaline rush and how excited I was. It was just like the biggest buck of my life was in front of me,
Yeah.
Yeah. It was an eye-opener for me.
And I didn't expect that. I've been hunting for a long time, and I really wasn't successful hunting until really just the last few years. But a couple years ago, I shot a 3.5-year-old 8-point not too far from here with my rifle. It was a Weatherby 7mm. It was about 70 yards. A spot I had scouted, kind of where a trail crossed the saddle, that kind of broke up a ridge, and it was kind of an area where scouting, I knew there was consistent doe traffic. And this buck came along just before dark, following on the nose of 3 does that had come before him. right in the rut on opening day a couple years ago. And that was definitely up until today, the one that really got my heart beating the fastest when I saw that and dropped that one. But today I got that with a spike, and I did not expect that at all. I was still hunting along kind of a tree line in kind of a semi-open area, and I spotted the kind of backside of the deer and couldn't tell what it was, but then I saw looked like it was licking a branch from what I could see, and then so I figured it was a buck, and I could see it was a spike, and it wasn't like a little spike. It was it had taller spike tines, but it was still a spike, so definitely a 1.5 year old buck. And at that point, still hunting with Reeker, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna kill this buck. So I played it right. I got my glass on him. Moved a little bit closer to him behind some cover, and then he started making his way back toward me. And I kind of had a tree next to me that provided some cover but had a sight window. And when he was coming back toward that sight window, man, my heart just kept beating harder and harder and harder. When he got to that sight window, it was about 17 yards away, and I was waiting for him to look away so I had room to draw, and that was the one thing that I didn't account for, is being able to do the motion of drawing my bow. But he was so close to me, looking generally my direction. He didn't see me, hence the face paint. But he would have seen that movement, and so I didn't draw on him. And then he kind of hit my scent wall, bounded around, looped back again the same way, same exact situation as a few seconds before. Again, though, he's looking my way, and I don't have a chance to draw where I'm not certain he's going to see that motion. And then he hits my scent wall a second time, as he gets a little further behind me, and then he was gone. But I completely consider that a successful day of hunting, because I had an experience hunting today that rivals any that I've had hunting, and it was simply because of the equipment choice that I used and the method that I chose to use, and those combined together with having a close encounter with a deer. It just engages that kind of hunting instinct to an extent that I haven't had before. And for me, that validates that experience, even though I didn't end up with venison. That experience right there validates my choice to switch to traditional archery.
Yeah, and it definitely amplifies it too when you're specifically up here for deer camp, right? You're not just out after work on a Wednesday.
No.
You've trekked a couple 100 miles. You're sleeping in an outfitter tent out in the backcountry, and you're deer hunting. And yeah, it's like, what a perfect way to bring it together.
Well, a perfect way to bring it together is over the next couple of days to actually connect on one and actually get the bow drawn back and release. So.
Right. Do you feel like a lot of the deer hunting programs and things are kind of missing the mark nowadays on, you don't see a lot of reflection on that type of experience? I mean, Stephen Ranella's started to have an impact, I think, in that manner. I know he's had an impact with me about the experience versus, I know I could travel to areas and make things easier on myself and shoot bigger deer or, go hunt a managed farm. But for me, I'm not super interested in that. I enjoy the experience, the coming up here, the big woods, the peace and quiet, the getting off the grid a little bit. Something about that, just, I don't know, and you obviously have it too, because our deer, you guys are sleeping in a tent, 5 miles from where we're sleeping in a tent.
I think if I made my still hunt tomorrow, if I just extended one leg of it out, I'd probably end up running into your camp.
Yeah.
From where I was kind of planning on going, so don't worry, I won't crowd you guys.
Yeah, hey, we're not going to be anywhere near there.
No, there's already a guy there hunting. I didn't.
Well, I won't crowd him then.
Yeah.
No, I don't know if I'd say they're missing the mark. They're missing the mark for me personally. But I think there's a lot of deer hunters for whom they're serving a market, and there's a lot of deer hunters that are interested in that side things, and that's okay.
I'll agree with that, but I just think there's so many other
Yeah.
things aside from that that I just don't ever see anything brought to light on.
Yeah, and maybe
Jim Shockey does a nice...
he does the experience.
Right.
I think for me, part of that is probably the way I learned to hunt. We went over to a deer camp on Beaver Island, and except for like the first year I was there, I think for like the first 10 years I hunted, we barely saw a deer, let alone shoot one. So it was certainly never about like big bucks and that kind of thing. But I kept coming back because it was the experience of deer camp. It was being out in the woods. It was being, especially with Beaver Island, I used to say it had multiple layers of insulation from civilization. You had like in the woods, in the swamp, on the island, in the middle of the lake. It just had multiple layers, and I feel that here in the Pigeon River country too. You're just out in it. You're out in the wilderness, in the wild, and when you're walking through the woods, you're part of the woods. And so that was always what brought me back. If it had ever been about shooting big bucks, I just never would have been a deer hunter, because that wasn't the experience we even had an opportunity to have.
Right.
Back then. So it's always been about much more. And then if you can shoot a big buck, that's kind of like icing on the cake.
Right.
But it's not the reason, at least I'm out here.
Right.
You know, I like eating venison, and I'd really like to get some venison using these particular methods and equipment that I've kind of found a passion for.
Yeah. You know, for listeners that are listening, I know we have a ton of people that listen from Michigan who are probably familiar with the Pigeon River, but you know, we have guys that listen out west and down south. Kind of describe what this place is, where we are, what it's all about.
Yeah, so the Pigeon River country is a state forest. And if you're listening out west and you hear about state land, you may have a different conception of the way than it's managed back east here. So out west, you have some of the state lands are state trust lands, and you can't hunt on them because they have to be managed to make a revenue for the state. And that's why there's such worry about federal land transfer, is that if you have federal land out west, you would be able to hunt. If it got moved to the state, they would block hunting and access for it and just manage it for revenue. But here in Michigan, in the Midwest, state lands are held in the public trust. So you can hunt them just like you could federal lands. They're just managed by the state DNR rather than the feds. So the Pigeon River Country State Forest got putting together in the early teens, in the early 20s. And this was an area of the northern lower peninsula that was extensively logged. It's really sandy soil, and after it was logged, a lot of farmers tried to make a go of it and really couldn't grow anything. So the land got tax reverted, either from once the logging companies logged it off, they had no use for it, or when the farmers went bankrupt because they couldn't grow anything in the soil, it got reverted back to the state. The first game chief for the Michigan Department of Conservation, which is now the DNR, was named Parrish Stores Lovejoy, or P.S. Lovejoy. And he had this idea of taking all these different scraps of tax reverted land and consolidating it together into a state forest that people could hunt and fish. And because this type of area was fast disappearing in Michigan, he envisioned it as what he called the Big Wild. It's just a big wild area. This is a time when, you know, people were starting to get, you know, Ford Model Ts and camping that way. He wanted this to be different. He actually had a quote saying that the side roads ought to be left plenty bumpy and brushy, and some so's you go in on foot or you don't go in at all. So it isn't too easy for the beer-belly gents and the nice old grandmas to get in, set to, and leave their tin cans at. So that was kind of his idea. He kind of wanted this to be a wild, kind of walk in, earn your way type of place. And it's had a varied existence. It was a site of a lot of controversy over oil drilling back in the 70s because the state had sold the rights to the oil underneath but didn't grant the access to drill from it from state land. That controversy actually ending up in the compromise that became the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund. So the Natural Resources Trust Fund is where they take the royalties from oil and gas on state land, put that in a trust, and use that to buy more public land. And that was something that was a compromise out of the fact that they were trying to drill for oil here in the Pigeon, and they had to work through it. So it's been gradually added to. It's called. It's about 105,000 acres now, and it's unique in that it has a concept of management that guides how it gets managed. So other state forests don't have that. They're kind of just like all the other ones. The Pigeon River country is special because of all those unique values and its history. It has to be managed in a certain way, generally for more quiet outdoor recreation, hunting and fishing. It's an area where ORVs aren't allowed. And then it has an advisory council that I actually sit on where we kind of review the management and provide advice, whether it's wanted or not, to the DNR on how it gets managed. So it's the site of Michigan's elk herd, which actually is coming up on its 100th anniversary from when it was reintroduced.
Oh, nice.
Yep, they introduced back in 1918 7 elk right around Wolverine.
Really?
And from there, we now have our herd of, roughly around 1,000. But they're kind of centered here, and that's really kind of one of the fun things of hunting here is you may be out hunting deer, and you come around a corner, come around a tree, and suddenly there's 4 bull elk, walking at you 30 yards away, screaming their heads off, and it really makes you feel it.
Yeah, ever since I've been coming up here, I don't remember that, just elk that they were here. And it's funny, talking to people in Michigan and saying, what, elk? What? We have elk? It's like, yeah, we certainly do, I'm fortunate enough that we, our father bought a piece of property with some friends that's seated right, it's 120 acres, but it's seated right in the right in the southern end of the Pigeon River State Forest. So walking off of our, private land, you can go for lots of miles on state forest, and yeah, there's just always been elk.
Yep. Last year, when I shot my doe, it was just back at here, and, still hunted with a compound, but while I was gutting it out, I had 2 bull elk fighting each other about 60 or 70 yards away down the valley from me. And that was quite an experience. You're just taking out, this organ and that organ and gutting it out and doing your thing, and just stop every once in a while, look up, and watch 2 bull elk fighting. So I think that's what helps it live up to its, the big wild moniker, is it's specifically managed that way. There's a lot of walk-in only areas to keep it that way, but you have elk. You have bobcat, but good luck ever seeing one.
Right.
You have black bear. You have white-tailed deer. You have small game, and then you have the sturgeon, the pigeon, and the black rivers, which are 3 of the best trout streams, and really all in North America. That all have their headwaters that flow through the forest
Right.
north. So trout fishing, hunting, whatever you want to hunt, backpacking. We really kind of have it all here. So actually, that's the name of our deer camp. We take that from the Big Wild. We call ourselves the Big Wild Bunch.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. This is our first venture over here. Our deer camp resides maybe, 5 miles south of here?
Yeah, 5 or 10 miles.
Yeah, so our deer camp's Buckhorn Ridge, and we ventured over to the Big Wild Bunch's deer camp. And that's how we kind of, built our friendship. Really,
Yep.
we had, some of the same interests when we had met, and then come to find out that, we've been, going to deer camp for years, just miles away from each other, and enjoy the same state forest, and now we find ourselves in a tent doing a podcast together. It's
Well, I think it's probably no accident then that we met ourselves at a Backcountry Hunters and Anglers pint night,
we
because I think it's those same values of wildness and public land and valuing the experience, over bragging rights or something, that attracts people to Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. I know that's why I joined. I joined because I hunted the Pigeon River country, and to me, this is a type of place that exemplifies what the organization is about. Big blocks of public land that you can, get lost in, and have a wilderness experience in, and keeping that both open to the public and keeping that wild character.
Right.
So that I know that's why I joined BHA. And if you kind of grew up, hunting here, it's probably, I would guess, what attracted you to that organization too.
Well, it was funny too because growing up, we had the private parcel, and we were always under the impression that that's where we should focus our efforts because public land gets all the pressure, and private land is where all the deer are going to be, right? And then we found it to be exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
The group of we multiple families own the property that we have. 4 families,
5, 4 or
5
5
owners.
Okay.
5 owners, 4 families,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So there's a lot of people. Everybody comes up, and it's there's rules, but they're not real strict. It's more about the experience, and everybody gets the opportunity to have fun and go out and explore the woods. And it puts a lot of pressure on everybody comes up for the week or the weekend, and trucks in and out, and the deer figure it out pretty quickly. So as we got more serious about deer hunting, we decided, well, we kind of need to get away from the people, and lo and behold, the way to do that was actually to go on the public land. And you had an unfortunate situation tonight where you ran into somebody and you were just like, what?
The first time in coming up here for 20 years. It was the first time I was ever walking through the woods up here and had someone whistle at me out of their tree stand. It's just like, am I in the right spot? What's going on? I stopped for a minute. I was like, was that somebody just whistling at me? But yeah, sure, there was a guy just sitting in this tree, so I turned around and walked back out of there. But that was the first time I'd ever walked into somebody hunting out here.
Yeah, I've never had an issue with that.
But when you talk about land being pressured, I think that's one of the big things that makes it so important to keep public land in public hands. When you have opportunities to add to that public land, so for instance, if large chunk of property becomes available that borders the Pigeon River country, that you support that going into state ownership and becoming part of it, because just simple rules of supply and demand is, if you have less public land, then it's going to get more pressured.
Right.
If your problem with public land is that it's too pressured, the solution to that is more public land, and you can spread people out more, and we all have a little more elbow room to hunt. So
right.
when I hear people say, well, I don't worry about keeping it public because I hunt on private land, or, well, public hunting land isn't good where I live because there's too many people, I'm like, well, the solution to that is more public land, and then it won't be so pressured. It won't be quite so crowded.
Right. I was at another deer camp last night, and I had my BHA, my public landowner T-shirt on, and I was threatened that it would be stolen from me when I was sleeping because they liked it so much. And I told them, you guys can go right to the BHA website and buy your own. But they were impressed with it. They liked that. They hadn't seen that before, the public landowner T-shirt. They were big fans of it.
Well, we put a challenge out on the Michigan chapter Facebook page to recruit at least one new member from deer camp.
Oh, really?
Yep.
How did I miss that?
I think I did. I put it in the text just of the picture of our canvas tent from last year.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I'm proud to say I got 2 commits from deer camp this year to join.
Man,
so.
I'm gonna have to go make another stop back at this deer camp tomorrow
Yeah.
night. And
Well, your problem is you guys are already members.
yeah, but I'll have to venture back over and tell these guys it's serious business. I need them to sign up.
Yeah.
They've been doing a lot of logging up here.
Well, it's a working forest, and they always do. And I think that's one of the things that I think people get the misconception about the Pigeon River country. It is wild, but they do log it. They always have.
Certainly.
When they log it, some people will see a clear cut and get worried about it. But, they're doing these logging plans on 50-year rotations. Often, they're planning out years in advance. They have compartment reviews a couple years ahead of time before they log a parcel, where people come in and give public comment. And as part of that concept of management for the pigeon that I mentioned, they actually have a guideline that in general we don't have clear cuts that are over 40 acres in one spot. In fact, if they have it over 40 acres, they have to send it to the advisory council for approval. But like right by where we hunt here, there's an older clear cut that's about 10 years old. And a couple years ago, it was starting to grow up when we first started coming here. But now it is an absolute rock solid, young aspen stand that is amazing grouse habitat. The elk love it, provides good cover for deer. So when you see those clear cuts, that first year sometimes it looks unsightly or that kind of thing. But if they're doing it right, and here they do a good job of really doing it right and planning it out well, that's going to be amazing wildlife habitat in,
Right.
5-10 years.
Well, I love it. I love that they do it all, because that's a lot of times where we'll focus our efforts is on the new cuts, because, that new successional regenerational growth is what the deer will look for browse. That's your food source, essentially, where there is no food source,
Yep.
like we were talking about earlier. That's one of the few things around here that you can kind of count on, and if you were hunting on private land and everybody's not on the same page, and you can't, we did finally just do some cutting on our private land, but for years it was just overly mature forest that was very poor wildlife habitat, and you can get away from that by coming here and finding some new cuts and stuff.
Well, that's giving you, more edge habitat too.
Right.
Every time you do one of those cuts, you're creating a new edge between timber and
Which deer
open.
love.
Oh yeah. It can be tough to walk through too, though.
Are you getting hot?
Oh, it's getting a little warm. We got the gas burner going.
Yeah, I think we should describe a little bit of what. So, when you guys came up here, the nightly low was 3 degrees, right?
Yeah.
And then the next night it was maybe like 10. We just missed that. We came up on the tail end of it, but it was cold.
Oh yeah,
right?
it's like 25 degrees might as well be summer.
Yeah. Yeah. In comparison to the last couple days and snow, last night when I was hunting, it was really coming down.
Yep.
And it makes for a nostalgic deer camp. Cold, snow.
Yeah, but you come inside, and it's
Right.
pretty nice. We got this. It's the Cabela's Alaknak 2 or something like that. 13 by 27. My little brother surprised us with it this year. It was quite the upgrade. We used to have a 12 by 20 Montana canvas, which was a nice tent, but this one was in pretty rough shape when we got it used. So, it had holes in it. The door didn't zip close. It was like stretched tight, so it had a lot of wind gaps that we'd fill with like PSB board.
Right.
So this is really nice. We got kind of room for everything, but we've got the cast iron wood stove, hooked up. We've got some buddy heaters and gas lanterns and that kind of stuff, so it keeps pretty warm in here.
Yeah, interesting to see listening back on the recording. We're listening to it in the headphones as we talk, but I like the sound of the propane of the lantern running here.
Well, it's one of those sounds that you get out here that just kind of make it part of the experience.
Right.
The Pigeon has some they call it like soundscape, like just the sounds of it that become part of the experience as much as the visual.
Oh, I never heard that term before.
Yeah, I heard it on like the Outside podcast one time, but ever since I heard that, I think about the soundscapes that we have here in the Pigeon River country, and it's part of why I think it's important that we keep kind of the rules in place where you don't have ORVs tearing up and down the road. What you hear here, we heard it when you guys were just coming in. You hear an elk bugle. You hear coyotes yipping. If it's in the summer and you're up on one of the lakes backpacking, you're hearing a loon wailing. I was out today and it was so still. There was hardly any wind. You just hear like that wish, wish, wish of wings of a bird flying overhead, and you can hear it for
Right.
coming from a long ways away, and then you realize if you can hear that bird that far up there, every time that you crunch a little bit of snow with every step, you realize how much of an impact that sound is having.
Right.
But when you come up here and you've been up here for a few days, and you're maybe driving back downstate with the radio off, and you're thinking about what you saw, I'm also thinking about what I heard. And that becomes as much of the experience as what I saw.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
there will be plenty of soundscape in our teepee tonight because we don't have any propane lantern, or it's just black where we're at, you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
Dark
we
and cold.
we essentially made a hot tent. So I bought a teepee, and Drew this week bought a stove jack, and I cut it in and put the stove jack in myself, and we've got a 12,000 BTU box stove that runs off propane.
Okay.
And, we could have done a little wood burner, and for the ambiance of it would have been really nice, but
It's also a lot of work.
it's a lot of work, and we want to hunt.
Yeah.
And at night, if it gets real cold, it's just nice to be able to keep it a consistent temperature. It's by no means real warm in there, but it's at least dry, and we don't have to get up every 2 hours or every hour and fill it with
Right.
wood, So it's a great solution.
Well, we really kind of use the propane burner as our warmth for sleeping.
Right.
The wood burners, the cast iron stove has a flat top, and we'll put that in and for our meals, we just kind of get these tin trays. My mom will cook up homemade meals and put them in these tin trays, and then we'll just put it on top of that flat iron, that flat top there,
Right.
and that kind of becomes our cooking stove.
Yeah, that's nice.
But yeah, for staying warm at night, we go new school with the propane burner.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, we did dinner tonight. We did jet boils. I had mine was a little better than Drew's. Why don't you go ahead and describe what you attempted to do?
Well, yeah, the jet boil canister does not work too great for cooking in. I just had a couple months ago, my daughter turned 5, and I smoked pork shoulder, and I took and I just vacuum sealed that stuff, and I had it in the freezer. So I grabbed one of those pouches and I dropped it in my jet boil. Well, it was a jet burn because it instantly just burnt everything that touched the bottom of that thing. So, but
Yeah.
I got through it. The outside was charred, the middle was warm, and then the center was a nice icy
It was extra
chew
smoky,
to it. But
extra smoky pulled pork
yeah,
real quickly.
yeah.
I was fortunate enough that my wife ordered me some dehydrated backpacking meals from Heather's Choice.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You had her on a couple episodes ago, right?
Yep, I did. And my wife listened to it, and my wife's real into wanting to do backpacking and hiking and things like that. So she knew I was going to do this, obviously, so she ordered me up a couple. I had smoked salmon chowder
Nice.
tonight, and it was pretty awesome. It was really awesome. I wasn't sure because it's pricey. I mean, obviously a lot goes into making a high quality dehydrated meal, but I think it was maybe $15 for that pouch, and realistically, in a pinch, we probably could have split that right down the middle,
Yeah.
and it would have done the deal to get us through the night. But I ate 75% of it because it was mine, and I did share 25% of it
Yeah.
to.
I ate my pork. I got through it.
But yeah, it was excellent, man. It was a real treat, and right away I was like, "Oh, I'll definitely buy these again." It was worth it for sure. To be able, I've really tried to focus the last couple of years on, historically when I'd go up north and go to deer camp, it was just running wild.
Chips, candy bars,
Chips, hot
cookies,
dogs, chili.
Yeah.
For the 4 days, and by the time you got home, you're just like, "Oh my god!"
Right.
Well, I usually try to eat pretty good, pretty clean, a little paleo primal-ish. I'll tell you what, that goes out the window when I get to deer camp. We got chocolate chip cookies. I actually drink beer instead of cider.
Right.
But it's deer camp.
Right. Well, we've been trying to eat a little bit healthier, bring real food, and actually do some cooking, and it's amazing just how much better you feel, versus eating a bunch of sugary shit.
But I figured, still hunting tomorrow, I'll probably
Well,
burn it off. When you're almost lunge stepping, a lot of the times. And think about lunge stepping for a 5-mile loop.
right.
By the time you're going up hills and back and forth and doing the full loop, you're burning some calories. So I don't feel too bad about the cookies.
Yeah. No, I don't feel bad about anything we've been eating. We we're hunting mobile, so we have tree stands that we put right on our backs with sticks, and we'll have our backpack with our warm gear. And you have to do it that way, because if you dress in your warm gear and you start heading out, even though might be 16 degrees, you're going to need that stuff when you get there. You'll be a sweated up mess within a couple hundred yards.
Right.
So, it's literally, real light top and stands on our back with a backpack strapped to the stand. And what's yours weigh? Your whole, mine's got to be 30 pounds.
My stand and sticks is 24 pounds.
And then your backpack and your clothes.
Backpack, bow, everything. I got probably 32, 35 pounds.
I got to be right there. I got to be probably a little bit heavier than you, I'm assuming.
Maybe. I'm a little bit heavier than you, though. So.
When I do, early season, I came out here and I did a 3-day backpack bow hunt in the green timber section of the Pigeon River country. And when I did that, I had my pack. I had, my camp in it, hammock, tarp, my pocket rocket, all that kind of stuff. And what I do is I'd move camp every day, so I'm hunting with my backpack, so I'm trying to keep that condensed, and it probably goes about 30, 35 pounds for my, camp setup. But what makes it nice hunting out of deer camp here, out of a base camp, is when I go out and still hunt, I don't have to have a backpack. I literally just put, my headlamp in my pocket for when it gets dark. In my other pocket, I have my stringer for my recurve in case something goes wrong. I can, unstring and restring it. I have my knife. I have my hunting license. And that's it. My bow, because it's a wood recurve,
weighs nothing.
Weighs pretty much nothing, a couple pounds at the most.
Right.
I got to tell you about this recurve. It's a Shakespeare Super Nikata, which was made between 1968 and 1972. Made of zebra wood, which they stopped making that in 72 because they started banning the importation of zebra wood because it was like endangered or something.
Where did it come from?
Oh, either South America or Africa.
Okay.
Someplace where they probably didn't have the best forestry practices, I'm guessing. But it's a short bow. It's 54 inches with a really thick riser, so it's really similar to the
I noticed
the
that.
Bear Kodiak Magnum.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that I got this bow is my dad, who's here with us, is he got it at a garage sale and found it for $5 or $10, $5. He's telling me, and knew that I was looking for a recurve. And this is a few years ago before I decided to hunt strictly with it, and picked it up for me. And a lot of old bows like that have been sitting around at a garage. They've got twisted limbs and that kind of thing.
Yep.
This thing shoots perfect. It's great. So I'm hunting with that, and my last bow was a brand new PSE compound, and I had the $100 riser, and the aftermarket sights and aftermarket quiver, and $400 bow. I probably had $800 into it.
Right.
And I'm hunting with a $5 bow right now.
Yep.
And I'm having so much fun with it. And I think it just goes to show, don't get me wrong, this, by all rights, should have cost a lot more. But I think a lot of times we get caught up in the equipment and the name brand. Like Shakespeare Archery, not going to give me a deal because they stopped making bows in like the late 70s. Like they don't even make that anymore. But
right.
It has zero to do with the quality of the experience that I'm having,
Right.
as far as having a name brand or how much money I spent on it. It's a piece of equipment that works well, and it works as well as I, as a hunter, am able to make it function.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what you're talking about is important, too, because I think a lot of times people think that they need to have the newest and the latest and the greatest, and sometimes you might find something that was made 15 years ago and it really fits into your system and it's a good working product. And it seems like, just like everything else now, technology moves so quickly. And the hunting.
Yeah, we're recording a podcast in deer camp.
Yeah, we're sitting in a tent.
There's a laptop in deer camp right now.
Yeah.
I don't know, somebody somewhere is like rolling over
Right.
in their grave.
Right. Exactly what I'm talking about. But there was a whole generation of archery equipment that was really good stuff. that came and went, seems almost too quickly. And that a lot of that stuff is when I first started getting into archery. You know, maybe the stuff from the early '90s when I was just getting old enough to like realize what was going on. And I've been collecting some of that stuff from garage sales and swap meets and stuff. And it's just like, man, I've really drawn to it. I'm like, man, this thing's cool. This was good. This is good, you know. But it just all goes so quickly, and in with the new and out with the old.
Yep. But, you know, the right piece of equipment can also enhance the experience.
Certainly.
My dad got a crossbow for the first time this year, and, you know, I've listened to some of the debates about crossbow and archery season and that kind of thing. And, you know, I'm a member of Michigan Bow Hunters Association. I'm a member of a primarily traditional archery club. But, you know, it's crossbows have been legal in bow season for a few years now. I think about 60% of people who participate in archery season are using crossbows. They're here to stay, and the way that I look at it is it allows my dad to get out here and hunt with us during archery season in deer camp. And for me, that's the end of the story.
Right.
You know, I don't personally choose to hunt with one. I may when I'm his age. You know, I'm he's going what? But you know, I'm going like backwards and you know in the technology thing. But
before it was legal for everybody, wasn't there like a senior and like a there was a clause where people that could use it that had disabilities,
right?
Or was there an older age too, like a senior? Did they make like a
Yeah, but you know he doesn't have a disability. He's just old. I'm just kidding. he's ready to kill me.
He's strong. He said he wasn't going to talk on the podcast, and he's holding up. He's a man of his word.
No, but like I said, it allows all of us as a family to get out here in deer camp and move it up a couple weeks and be out here together.
Right.
And to me, that right there makes it worth keeping it around. And frankly, it's going to stay around anyway. So it kind of goes to this like saying I used to have is like hunt your hunt. Like you know, if you're not into crossbows, cool, don't use them. But I think you know hunter numbers are not on the increase in general. I don't think we're in danger of like so many deer being killed during archery season that we have to shorten the seasons.
Right.
I just don't see that happening.
Not here in Michigan. I've talked to some guys out west that have concerns because the deer numbers are real low.
Yeah.
And obviously the guys that are hunting with traditional gear, success rate is much lower than the guys that are hunting with traditional gear.
But out west, their deer numbers are so different. I mean, Michigan, we kill, 300,000 plus deer a year.
Right.
600,000 hunters overall. But we used to have 1 million hunters.
Right.
And we used to kill even more deer. So,
right.
You know, Michigan has that habitat. We have that herd. And it can sustain it with using crossbows in archery season. I think when it comes down to something like that, you do have to go with the data. And if the data says that herd is doing fine and we don't have to shorten the seasons, then I think then you look to how do we make sure that we allow the opportunity.
I completely agree, and you know what I've seen firsthand is guys that over the course of the years have wounded multiple deer, and you know they just might not have the ability to be a good archer, or they might not have the time to invest into being an efficient archer, and they still want to go. And I'd rather see those guys go out and be lethal with a crossbow than go out and wound animals with regular archery equipment.
Absolutely. You know, yeah, and the time is real. You know, for me to switch over to becoming a traditional archer, I shoot just about every day and have for probably over a year now. I started shooting with, you know, practicing with this bow really seriously after I shot my doe last year, the opening weekend of archery season. So over a year now, I've been practicing pretty much every day, at least 4 or 5 days a week. Well, if you don't have that time to invest in that, you probably, you know, unless you're just really good, I'd rather you're out there with a crossbow that's dead nuts, you know, as soon as you pull it out of the box,
right?
Than you know, chance of wounding something.
Right.
Yep.
We're getting close to an hour here, and I want to keep it right at an hour because we're going to do some deer camp socializing, and I didn't come over here to just make you guys sit down and do a podcast. We're gonna shut this thing down, get rid of the electronic gear, and enjoy deer camp like it should be enjoyed. But
Euchre and beer.
I want to talk about deer camp for a couple minutes, because I've had some guys message me online and say, hey, I'm really envious of you that you're going to deer camp. You know, we used to go to deer camp and we don't do it anymore. We don't have time. Or, you know, my father and my uncles, they didn't want to do it anymore. And I think it's a tradition that's fading. I don't know across the country out west if they do anything like we do here. And even you can I don't even think you can use the Midwest as a sample size. I know Wisconsin has a pretty strong tradition for deer camp. I don't know about Pennsylvania, but obviously here in Michigan it's a giant thing.
You know, it's what we do here, and you know, just watch. Well, don't watch the movie Escanaba in the Moonlight as like the example of what deer camp should be. But the very fact that they made a movie about it kind of tells you the importance that it has in our culture.
Yeah.
You know, we used to get in high school, the first 2 days of firearm season, we had excused absence. You could miss those 2 days and not get dinged. I know some schools even closed down on those days. It's almost like a holiday. So, you know, deer camp is something that it's cultural. A lot of times it's family. For me, it's a chance to hang out with my dad, with my brother, with my cousin. When we used to go up to Beaver Island, it was, you know, with my grandpa. And I think a lot of times with deer camp, the actual hunting is almost secondary to the experience of just kind of being in camp with some guys and some girls, if you know, if they're in your camp too. And I think increasingly you're seeing that, which is a good trend. But it's just a chance to hang out, to kind of let loose, say things that you probably couldn't say anywhere else. Be honest. You know,
could say it, but
yeah,
you'd be scorned.
Drink a couple
Twitter would
beers,
not be happy.
play some very competitive games of euchre. You know, it's just an amazing experience, and it's one that, you know, I go to a lot of kind of like out of town events. My dad and I were talking about this earlier, and they're really cool. You know, you go to like the ATA show or outdoor writers conferences, and they're really fun events, but they all pale in comparison to deer camp. This is the one thing I would just not miss.
I agree.
You know,
fully. We have friends right now that are down in Ohio, and you know, they want to get a bigger deer, an older age structured deer, which I totally get. But I just can not come up here. I'd rather, for me personally, just because it's been my upbringing and my history, I'd rather come up here and sit in the woods and not see a deer for a week than go drive to a state that I have no history in, and that, you know, I'm just not totally in love with the experience, and shoot some deer of a lifetime. I mean, at some point I might want to do that too, but it'll never be the week of
Right.
opening day of firearm deer season.
Well,
Yeah.
and when you say like a deer of a lifetime, to me, it wouldn't be a deer of a lifetime unless I had a connection with the country where I took it. You know, so
I totally.
if I went over on Beaver Island or I, you know, here in the Pigeon River country, I got, you know, lucked upon one of those deer. It would only be a deer of a lifetime if I put some work into it, and it wasn't just probably dumb luck. If it was an area that I had scouted, or a country that meant something to me, you know, a terrain that evoked the type of feelings that this, you know, pine barrens, birch, cedar swamp, upland hills, oak barrens, like there's something that just that combination of terrain evokes, and it'd have to be in that kind of country, and it'd probably have to be using the methods that I've invested time and years really into.
Yeah.
And it could be really a much smaller deer than you would think of a deer of a lifetime, and it would still be that if all of those factors were present.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I'm obviously up here. I
Yeah.
got $150 Ohio tag burning a hole in my wallet right now too, though. So,
And one of our friends did shoot a nice 10-point buck tonight.
So I'm getting
Good
that
for
text
him.
message, looking at a 10-point buck on my phone, and I'm looking at a 110-pound yearling
Well,
walking through, But
Well, we saw just a monster about what 4 miles, 5 miles west of here. I mean, it might have been on private land, but it was private land like just bordering the Pigeon River country, and it's one of those deers that kind of you dream about.
oh yeah, there's some big deer up here. There's no doubt.
There's a handful of them. We have
They'll make you work for it. For sure.
our friend that shot that nice buck tonight. He shot one of the biggest deer off of our property. It was like 133-inch perfect symmetrical 8-point, and then we have a friend that hunts just north of here in the Pigeon River, and he shot like 146-inch 11-point a couple of years ago. So they are here.
Yep.
They're just on another level educated, and they have a lot of places to hide out, and you gotta really have some time or some good luck invested to catch up with them.
Yeah.
But that's the dream. Like you just said, you took the words right out of my mouth. Like that's
Sorry.
my dream, Buck. You're forgiven.
When you talk about guys saying, I miss deer camp, or deer camp can really be whatever you make of it. Before we started, setting up our regular public land, deer camp tent here in the Pigeon River country, when we used to go over to Beaver Island, there was a year that you have to take a ferry or a plane ride over to Beaver Island. There was a year that it couldn't go. And I was really bummed because I think it had been a few years since I had been there. I had been living in Chicago and I had just moved back, so I was really excited to go, and then I couldn't go, and we kind of figured by the time the ferry ran, we weren't going to have enough time, to go there and actually get any hunting in before you had to turn around and come back. So I went to Jay's Sporting Goods, who, by the way, is a great supporter of the Michigan chapter of BHA. Bought a new 2-man Eureka backpacking tent. And I brought it out here and set it up in the Pigeon River country. And I was like, well, I can't go to deer camp, but I'm setting up this tent, and I slept out here in the snow, and my dad was going to come out and join me for the day. I wasn't going to sleep in that. He was going to come out and join me and have lunch. I was doing a backpacker's pantry, a mountain house type of meal. So he was going to come out and join me, and that would make it deer camp. We're out here. It's not, like we have now, but that was deer camp, and that meant as much, him coming out and doing that. But the way that he found me, I had to tell this story. So I'm a pretty dedicated still hunter, and that's because he taught me how to hunt, and he was always a still hunter. But I thought, I've taken what he taught me, and then I've taken it to the next level. I've read all these books and watched all these videos and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, he taught me how to do it, but now maybe I've gone further than that is kind of what I was thinking at the time. So I'm still hunting around. I'm following the track. I'm following the wind. I'm doing everything just right, to the T of how, I think this country on this day in these conditions ought to be hunted. And I'm out there for a few hours, and, he was going to meet me, at my camp for lunch. And I'm, mile and a half maybe from where my camp was, and I hear a whistle in the woods. And I turn around and I look, and I'm looking, and the sound of the whistle, well, it's my dad. Not where I told him to meet me at my camp, but like a mile and a half further where I was. And I just didn't understand it. And then he told me, and if you want to speak, you got to tell me.
Just follow the terrain, and where you need to be with the wind direction and the terrain, and that's where you should be.
And that's where I was.
Yeah.
And so that told me right there that no matter how much I thought I might have progressed past what he taught me, it was only because I only learned a fraction of what he was teaching me, and he already knew the rest. So he's using a ladder stand now, but he's the original still hunter. And I just had to tell that story because, here I am thinking I'm, Fred Bear out there, still hunting with the best of them. And
He finds you in
a mile and a
15
half,
minutes.
he finds me, and he doesn't even follow my tracks. He just, sees where my tracks started, was like, okay, wind's going this way, hill's going that way, da 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 da. He's going to be over here, and sure enough, he was right.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. How the heck you find you all out there? That's unbelievable. I've been in spots in this forest where I feel like no one has ever stepped foot, ever. And it's not just once or twice. It's like
Yep.
quite a few times when I go out there, I get myself into some spots where it's like there's just no way anyone has ever stepped foot right here where I'm standing.
That was a
There's
big part of why I wanted to come up here instead of going to Ohio. Just
Yep.
because you can come out here, you can walk, half a mile, you sit down, and, I work in the trades, so my hearing's going on me already anyways, but you sit down and all you can hear is like the faint ringing in your ears because it's just so quiet. There's no cars, there's no road noise, there's nothing. You'll just hear the wind coming through the pines and like ravens or elk or like you just get completely away from society and all its problems. It's awesome up here for that.
Yeah, we're camping right off a road, just like you guys are.
Yep.
One truck went down that road today, and it was my brother, and he pulled into my camp. So, other than that, well, I guess you did say the one guy came through who
Yeah.
you happen to, how in the world,
I have no idea.
one other vehicle, that guy happened to be hunting in the same area that you were hunting, but
Yeah, it's a special place, and those qualities that make it special. We need to keep those qualities. Not everybody appreciates those. Some folks kind of want to do whatever they want to do, and one thing I'm proud of the BHA chapter is there was a proposal to, and there's a state law that's opening up ORVs in most of the forest roads in the Lower Peninsula, and there was a push to include the Pigeon River country in that. And the DNR and their plan said, we don't think it's the right place for that. And in support of that, the Michigan chapter Backcountry Hunters and Anglers generated, dozens and dozens of comments in support of keeping these roads close to ORVs to keep those same qualities that we've been talking about. And in similar places like the Deward Tract, which is an area of the Manistee River, not too far from here either. And that's something that the local chapters, like the state level chapters of BHA, I think do really well. And I'm proud of our chapter that when we put that call out, there was such a strong response. And I think it's because the folks that are attracted to backcountry hunters and anglers have had those experiences like we've all had that attracted us. And when you hear about places like this, whether you've hunted here or not, you've hunted somewhere that gave you that same feeling. And it makes you want to protect all of them.
right.
Yep.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's a lot of access for those other kinds of activities. There's pretty limited quiet places,
Yep.
free range quiet places.
Yep. Well, quiet except for bugling elk and
And come
yipping coyotes.
and come Wednesday, a lot of heavy rifle fire.
Yep.
It won't
Yep.
be quiet Wednesday. Wednesday it'll be a little bit noisy, but well, thanks a lot for letting us come over here and bombard your deer camp, and
We appreciate it. Thanks for coming over. And
yeah, it's been long overdue.
Yeah.
It worked out great. I'm glad we got to do this.
Yep. Well, as they say here in the Pigeon River country, keep it public and keep it wild.
Yep. And good luck to anybody. There is a slim chance that I will head into Gaylord tomorrow and get this episode published on its weekly schedule. There's also a chance, which seems a little more likely, that I'm going to be trekking a mile out into a swamp and I'm not going to be coming in until tomorrow night. So this might not be heard until after, but I hope everybody has a good opening day of firearm deer season in the state of Michigan. So,
Good luck, guys.
okay. Thanks for listening.